Good afternoon, good morning. I would like to welcome you to today's webinar on plant-based protein developments in Canada and the Netherlands and opportunities for collaboration. My name is Carolee Garretts and I'm the Director of Business Development at Protein Industries Canada. I will be your moderator for today's webinar. I would like to take a moment to recognize the partners who have come together to deliver today's webinar. The Consulate General of the Netherlands in Vancouver, OostNL, and the Embassy of Canada to the Netherlands have been working together with us over the past few weeks to develop today's program. A sincere thank you for the wonderful collaboration. On a logistical note, I would now like to walk you through the features of the Zoom webinar platform as outlined on this slide. This black toolbar is at the bottom of your screen for those of you using a computer, and on the top if you are using a tablet or mobile device. The first button on the left is the audio settings control. This is where you can adjust the volume of the webinar. The next button is chat. You could use the chat feature for two purposes. One is to communicate with us for any technical issues you may encounter, and the second is to interact with other attendees. If you are having technical issues, please first try leaving the webinar, closing all other applications, and then rejoining. If you are still having technical problems, please contact Carson Sinclair via the chat function. The next tool is the Q&A feature. There will be a Q&A session at the end of the presentations. Please send us your questions throughout the webinar using this Q&A feature. Within the Q&A function, you will see an upvoting or thumbs up symbol. It is used similarly to a like on social media. If you see a question posted in the Q&A feature that you would also like answered, please click on the thumbs up symbol to boost the question to the top of the list. Without any further ado, I would now like to begin today's webinar. It is my great pleasure to introduce the first of two distinguished guests who will deliver opening remarks for today's session. Ms. Lisa Helfand is Ambassador of Canada to the Kingdom of the Netherlands and Permanent Representative of Canada to the Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons. She holds a Bachelor of Legal Laws from Osgoode Law School and joined the Department of External Affairs in 1989. Most recently, Ambassador Helfand was Director General of the Consular Operations Bureau, and prior to that, Ambassador of Canada to Hungary, Slovenia, Bosnia, and Herzegovina. Ambassador Helfand, I would like to now pass the microphone over to you.
Thank you very much, Carolee, and hello to everyone on both sides of the Atlantic, especially those of you who got up super early on the West Coast. I'm talking to you, Hank. It's a real pleasure for me to join the webinar this afternoon. I keep telling the team, plant proteins are some of my favorite proteins. As you know, our planet's running out of resources. It's obvious that we are going to have to consume more plant proteins in order to reduce our global footprint. And in order for this transition to succeed, we'll have to continue to innovate. I can tell you as a consumer that the good news is that the plant proteins are getting tastier all the time. And our countries can help with this innovation by working together. Canada has expertise in the production and processing of large volumes of pulses and soy. The Netherlands, on the other hand, has expertise in breeding plants, product development, commercialization, and access to international markets. There are already some great research collaboration projects going on between experts in our two countries. And we appreciate the great support that my team is getting from OostNL, the Economic Development Agency in the eastern part of the Netherlands, and the Dutch representatives in North America. They're helping organize the virtual mission in plant proteins planned for October. In addition, I'd like to encourage everyone to look at the benefits offered by CETA, the Economic and Trade Agreement between Canada and the EU. Under CETA, there are lower import duties for beans, soybeans, and peas, as well as enhanced labor mobility and access to government procurement. My Trade Commissioner, Diederik Boetner, will tell you more about this in his presentation later today. I wish you the best, and please let my team know if the Embassy can assist you in any way. We know this collaboration is going to be a success. Thank you. Back to you, Carolee.
My pleasure to introduce Mr. Frank Hart. Frank Hart is the Board Chair for Protein Industries Canada. Mr. Hart's career has included roles as Vice Chair, Managing Director, and Chief Risk Officer of Greystone Managed Investments Incorporated, President of EDS Canada, CEO and President of Crown Investments Corporation of Saskatchewan, Vice President of KPMG Consulting, and Deputy Minister of Saskatchewan Economic Development and Trade. Frank, over to you.
It's just my pleasure to welcome all of you who have joined us today. This dialogue of interest between Canada and the Netherlands has been underway for some time. It took a major step forward last November in Vancouver with a meeting that the Netherlands organized, and I think as Ambassador Helfand and Diederik know, this exploration of common interest between our two countries has been underway for some time now. I think it's particularly powerful when two of the world's leading exporters of food and agriculture products can cooperate around addressing global challenges of producing more food while improving the environment, and to look at these as a both and versus an either or. I know there's a lot to be gained for the citizens of Canada and for the Netherlands through this cooperation, as well as for other food consumers around the world. And this focus on increasing collaboration around science and technology, our two-way trade, and to leverage the strengths of both our nations in this important area of global food supply is a great initiative to support the increased competitiveness of our respective economies as we work together. So I hope you'll find the discussions today enlightening and positive as we work together to pursue one of the world's great economic opportunities around plant proteins. And now I think over to you, Carolee. I'm looking forward to hearing from Hank, and welcome, Hank. It's good to see you again.
Difficulties there. So now it is my pleasure to introduce to you Mr. Henk Snoeken, Consul General of the Kingdom of the Netherlands in Vancouver, Canada. Henk Snoeken is Consul General. He has held various positions in Dutch ministries, of which the latest were Deputy Director for National Spatial Planning and Deputy Director for International Relations at the Ministry of Infrastructure and Environment. Hank, over to you.
Thank you, Carolee. Thank you, Ambassador Helfand, for your greetings to the early West Coast, and thank you, Frank, for hosting us today as you are chairman of the Protein Cluster Canada. Thank you very much. I am Consul General of the Netherlands in Vancouver, but not only talking as a Consul General, but also representing the Ministry of Agriculture in the Netherlands and the Canada Network of the Dutch diplomatic missions in Canada, so the Consulate General in Toronto and the Embassy in Ottawa. Collaboration between Canada and the Netherlands in the field of the protein industry. The first question is, of course, why should you go to or work with the Netherlands when it has only the size of Vancouver Island and when it has only half the population of Canada? I think there are three main reasons for this collaboration. First of all, although a small country, it is the agri-food exporter #2 in the world after the United States. It has about 5,300 agricultural companies, so a large ecosystem of food producing companies and technology producing companies. But let's also look at the location of the Netherlands. Central in the European continent, 244 million customers live in 600 miles of the port of Rotterdam and of the airport of Schiphol. The port of Rotterdam is the biggest port in Europe. Schiphol is the 4th cargo airport in the world, and still also in these times when live and physical transport is getting difficult, I also would like to tell that the internet cables coming from North America are going up in the Netherlands, so also a guarantee to get your digital messages smoothly and very fast to the Netherlands. So a gateway to Europe and second food producer in the world, and last but not least, an innovative company. Then what is the strength of the sector, of the agriculture sector in this country when it has become such a big exporter on such a very small landscape? I think the first characteristic of the Dutch agriculture is that it is sector with a very innovative approach to agriculture. The Dutch are well known for all kinds of technologies. Me here living in the west of Canada, the Fraser Valley, the lower mainland of BC, we see the greenhouse technology of the Netherlands also coming here to Canada. So a well-known technological innovative country. The second thing that characterizes Dutch agriculture economy is, I think, an emphasis on added value and not so much on resource alone. Third one is the production surplus. The huge amounts of products that are produced in the Netherlands also took care that we have to be very aware of how do we get our goods to other countries when we export it. So the supply chain knowledge of the Netherlands is an important part of our agricultural sector also. See it, for example, in the cold chain technology that was first of all developed for European purposes, but is now working on trains to China. Our flowers are being brought in cooled trains to China. So a huge emphasis also on supply chain. What we see, of course, is also that such a large production of agricultural products also leads to environmental constraints. But I think we can say that the environmental constraints that are coming up more and more are also a new trigger for innovation in the Netherlands. The innovation is aimed at the circularity of agriculture. So how do we take care that there will be not so much food waste? The innovation is aimed at climate aspects of agriculture and, of course, to more sustainable food. Dutch economy and also the Dutch agri-food culture is characterized by cooperation. The cooperative model between government, research institutes and industry is an important part of the Dutch approach to all economic sectors. I think in the year 2016, Dutch government acknowledged that, and I quote, a shift in production and consumption from animal to vegetable proteins seems inevitable if we want to create a healthier and more sustainable food system. I think this short sentence is the basis of a lot of developments, apart of course also from the consumer preferences and market developments coming up that steer the working industry. The successful cooperation of the three partners, government, industry and research institutes, I said before, is because government leads and gives direction, industry makes it happen and scales up the smaller developments that are done in research, where you find a lot of innovation and startups. So these three things, a long-term direction, an industry that makes it happen, and research institutes that belong to the top universities in the world are important for our agri-food sector. Apart from the homegrown agri-food sector, which I talked about before, we also see that a lot of foreign companies and other countries are looking at the Netherlands to work together in the specialized fields the Netherlands has developed. A message we saw last week, and I'm sorry it's a message in the Netherlands, but on the left side below you see Vega burgers of Beyond Meat are coming from the Netherlands in the future. We're very happy to see that the US company Beyond Meat has last week opened the first co-manufacturing facility in the Netherlands with the company called Zandbergen, and has also acquired a second production facility in the eastern part of the Netherlands. And so the Netherlands will be the first production facility outside of the United States of Beyond Meat. When this this sheet was produced last Sunday, we didn't know that developments are going that fast. We just saw that this week the company Upfield announced an investment of about 15 million euros in a new research institute that will be based on the grounds of the Wageningen University in the east part of the Netherlands. So what we see is that the existing ecosystem of agricultural companies and government and research institutes also leads to sheer interest of foreign countries to cooperate with the Netherlands. We of course also hope that we can expand the beginning collaboration with the protein industries Canada. As Frank told before, we're talking a little bit already in the last years, but I think in the year 2018 we made a big step towards more cooperation. We're very happy to cooperate with PICS because it has an open international orientation with an eye for long-standing cooperation based on mutual understanding. And I think Canada has a comparable business climate and has a lot of interlinkages with the Netherlands, but also complementary expertise. So I think here we find all the bases that we need for long-standing cooperation. Where do we see possibilities? Well, first of all, of course, it's all about industry, business-to-business cooperation, the trade mission we are doing next week. The first digital trade mission we are doing next week is, of course, aimed first of all at bringing companies from the Netherlands and Canada together. Also important is the knowledge-to-knowledge cooperation between universities. We have this wonderful university in Canada, Guelph, we have UBC here in Vancouver, we have all kinds of other universities, but also the Wageningen University and the 4 technical universities in the Netherlands that I think can very well work together in this field. Then of course governments can also cooperate. I'm happy that also the ambassador of Canada is here at this workshop today, and the presence of both of us here is, I think, an expression of the fact that also governments want to work together in this field. Last but not least, but very practical, next week the first Dutch agri-food mission, the first Dutch digital agri-food mission to Canada in the internet, cooperating with you in the Protein Summit in North America. We have to acknowledge, of course, the great work of the Bridge to Food organization that has brought us together for a long time already, and we're very happy to be with an important delegation of Dutch companies at the Protein Summit North America. We will be there, and all our networks will have all our networks available there. There will be a digital breakout, and there will be rooms and booths concentrating on what we in the Netherlands are offering and where we are looking for cooperation with Canada. And also we are working hard together with Protein Industries Canada on making introductions and matchmaking arrangements with companies. I think we've laid the basis for good cooperation in the last years, and I wish all the companies, knowledge institutes, and also ourselves lots of success in the near future to make this cooperation work in the spirit of the already longer lasting friendship between Canada and the Netherlands. Thank you so much, Carrie. Back to you.
Thank you very much, Henk. It's now my pleasure to introduce to the audience Mr. Diederik Buitener, Trade Commissioner at the Embassy of Canada to the Netherlands. Mr. Buitener is the Trade Commissioner responsible for agriculture at the Embassy of Canada to the Netherlands. The TCS helps Canadian companies expand and succeed internationally. The TCS provides export assistance, helps understand trade agreements, promotes Canada as a dynamic place in which to invest and do business, and enhances Canada's science and technology capacity, competitiveness, and prosperity. Diederik, over to you, please.
Thank you, Carolee. It's a wonderful event you've got going. wonderful to speak to you in Canada and the Netherlands on plant proteins, and specifically my organization, which is the service. We are oops. Trying to move my slides here. 1 second. One slide back, please. The Trade Commissioner Service, the Trade Commissioner Service is based and the federal government's largest international presence. We have offices in pretty much all capitals around the world, including those in Europe. Typical size of the Trade Commissioner Service teams is, I would say, 7 to 9 staff, and you'll meet basically locally engaged staff working together with Canada-based staff on commercial support. What I've basically been asked is give you some examples what typically our service to Canadian and Dutch companies is. So I'll give you some examples. I'm not sure, Carson, can you move the slide? Can you move to the next slide? So first example is a company in Alberta, which is active in the meat industry. So what our team here in the Embassy of Canada in the Netherlands, what we did is we started helping them securing a particular person at the NFIA, or the Netherlands Foreign Investment Agency. Somebody specifically for the agri-food sector that helped them set up and open a subsidiary. We also then helped them with very specific questions on tax, on corporate tax, by introducing them to a specialized tax advisor that could actually help them with very specific questions regarding Dutch customs, and had experience with meat industry around the world. So very interesting person to meet up with. Then what we did is we introduced them to HIDC, which is Holland International Distribution Council. And these are the folks that are running a beautiful support agency for logistics services. We at the embassy, we quite often, we know a few logistics firms, but it's really a lot better to connect with them, either directly or via me, to get matched with 2 or 3 matching logistics service providers. In their case, they need cold storage in Rotterdam, and when you look at the stats, you'll see that the Netherlands has a strong capacity in cold storage. So it was for them, it was really good to be based there, to do business from that cold storage in the European market. We connected them with agri-food promotion events across Europe, such as Anuga, but also the so-called Taste of Canada events that are held across Europe nowadays. And we help them specifically regarding our CETA trade agreement with Europe. We help them with specific questions on rule of origin, which is always, when you look at free trade agreements, it's one of the key topics. Carson, can we move one slide? Next slide. For a small fruit exporter in Quebec, we knew that they had a pretty strong Dutch business partner that did business for them in the European market. So in a joint venture, they reached out to me at the embassy because they started having some real issues with the so-called end-use tariff, which in European Union is sometimes becoming quite a hurdle to do business. So we again advised them to talk to one of our tax advisors that we know of, and to actually start negotiating with local tax authorities. We followed up thoroughly, and in the end, the joint venture was able to do a lot more business by reducing the tariffs. In the time that in 2017, when CETA, the free trade agreement with Europe, when it was implemented, we started highlighting CETA events specifically for agri-food audiences to this joint venture, so they could start benefiting from those information gathering sessions. And we made sure that the Dutch business partner actually was now doing or promoting the business from Quebec in the Canada pavilions across Europe. Next slide, please. What would be a good tool for some of you in the Canadian and Dutch audience, what would be interesting for you to check out is the Tariff Finder, which was set up by my agency together with EDC and BDC, two very large organizations in Canada. Tariff Finder gives you a quick access to import tariffs before and after CETA. So typically in agri-food products, you see a significant drop, and we've seen a phenomenal growth in the agri-food exports from the Netherlands into Canada, and likewise from Canada into the Netherlands. We're looking currently at some 500 million agri-food exports into the Netherlands, and it continues to grow. We're seeing a real positive effect from that FTA. Next slide, please. We also would like to give you some example of some of the things that we learned over the last couple of years. I'd like to really tell you as a business audience, when you look at doing business in Europe, in the Netherlands, you really have to be persistent, you have to be patient. Don't become one of those North American companies that are in or out of the market, that pop up every once in a while. Now you have to be persistent, you need to really commit to that market, take a long-term view, and make sure that you understand that the European Union is one huge market of 500 million consumers. For you to be having regional, perhaps, just focus on the Benelux, Belgium, Netherlands, Luxembourg. That by itself is already a pretty large consumer market to focus on. The size actually of the Canadian economy and the Canadian number of citizens. Next slide, please. We have developed a number of guides for you. The one on the left and on the right, expanding into the EU and exporting to the EU, are phenomenal guides when it comes to the nitty-gritty of exports and doing business in Europe. Things such as value-added tax, labeling of product, finding consultants, working with business agreements, CETA as a comprehensive economic trade agreement. How do you benefit from those type of things are in a very nice way, in a detailed way, presented in those guides. In the middle is maybe not so interesting for the audience, is a government procurement guide for people that are, let's say, architects or engineers. So I don't expect many of you to be in that sector. Next slide, please, which I think is my team, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, it's my team. So these are the trade commissioners. I've left out the commercial assistants. It's a team of 7 to 8 people with particular sector responsibilities. So for science and technology, we'll talk to Caroline Bolduc, raised and born and raised in Quebec. Samina Qureshi is my manager, team manager. Both are Canada-based. And then on the right-hand side, you have the locally based staff, with myself working on agri-food for about, I think, 19 years now. My contact details down below. I'd like to hear from you when you have more questions. And Carolee, I think for the next, let's move on to the next speaker. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Diederik. It's now my pleasure to introduce our next speaker. Bill Gruel is the CEO of Protein Industries Canada. Prior to joining PIC, Mr. Gruel was Assistant Deputy Minister, Regulatory and Innovation for the Saskatchewan Ministry of Agriculture. In addition to his public sector experience, Bill has worked with a biotech startup and a large multinational agriculture company. Bill, over to you, please.
Thank you, Carolee. And I've been thinking a lot about the partnership between the Netherlands and Canada recently, and the first number of speakers have really cemented in my mind why this is such an important discussion. I thank Ambassador Helfand and Frank, my board chair, for setting the stage and talking about one of the world's greatest economic opportunities. And Hank, you focused on some of the priorities for the Netherlands around plant protein, circular and sustainable agriculture, and food innovation. I think it really speaks to the need for a more strategic relationship and partnership between our countries. So today I'd like to just talk a little bit about Protein Industries Canada, a little bit about the Canadian opportunity, what we believe we have to offer to the partnership, a little bit about us as an organization, and our project pipeline. We're focused on developing the plant protein sector in Western Canada through the funding of large-scale science and innovation projects and building the capacity of our member companies to be global powerhouses in the development and sale of plant protein products. And so I will speak to that. So, you know, it's really interesting to hear the perspective of the Netherlands in terms of being the world's second largest exporter of food, and only being the size of Vancouver Island. We've got a very different situation in Canada, and I think it speaks to the partnership. We are a global food powerhouse as well, but in a very different way in terms of the export of agri-food products, commodities, and ingredients. We're home to over 6,000 food processors. We have a highly regarded food safety system. Ambassador Helfand talked a little bit about the positive trade relationships that Canada has with many jurisdictions globally, and a very good and strong place to do business in the agri-food sector. So for us, what do we offer to the partnership? And I think this is really where the two nations can come together and create something for the future. We are sitting on 28 million hectares of arable land. We're one of the 5 jurisdictions globally that is a net exporter of food. Canada is the world's largest exporter of pulses, the world's #1 producer of lentils and peas, and the world's largest producer and exporter of canola. We are a world leader in plant sciences and agriculture capabilities, and I think this speaks to some of the things I've heard today about the focus on sustainability from a production perspective, a highly sustainable, environmentally conscious agriculture production in Western Canada. Protein Industries Canada, our vision is that we will be a world leader in plant protein. And, you know, the 28 million hectares of land that I discussed results in an average annual production of between 60 and 70 million metric tons of crop production. A lot of that crop production is high protein pulses and canola. We produce on average about 14 million metric tons of plant protein. That plant protein is highly sustainable and has unique functionality because it's derived from crops that we produce at scale in Western Canada that most other jurisdictions around the world do not produce, from peas and canola. And so our mission, we invest to accelerate innovation and the competitiveness of the Canadian plant protein sector. And I will speak in practical terms what that means for us. We are a member-based organization, and I think this is a really important slide in terms of, I looked at the survey that came in, and we've got a lot of people from the Netherlands on the call today. And so if you're interested in working with Canada, Protein Industries Canada is a great gateway into the industry. We're a member-based organization, and we're comprised of the entire value chain, from seed and commodity producers right through to ingredients and food manufacturers, financial and business services, commodity groups, agriculture technology companies, and agriculture manufacturing. We can really serve as a one-stop shop for access to a wide swath of industry representation across the entire value chain at Protein Industries Canada. So our investment philosophy, we are investing over $300 million into the development of the plant protein sector over the next 4 years. We've to date committed almost $80 million, and I'll speak a little bit to the types of projects that we're funding so you can get a sense of the scope and scale of the investments that we're making. Our investment thesis is really around collaborative research between private sector companies and post-secondary and academic institutions and government research labs. But certainly we're welcoming international R&D partners into our collaborations. We really see the benefit of international collaboration in terms of bringing new food technologies, new food innovation, new ingredient manufacturing technology to Canada. And so we really do focus on the idea of collaborative R&D and asking Canadian companies to do business a little bit differently. And a little bit differently is direct collaboration with other members of the value chain, thinking a little bit outside in terms of bringing in new technologies, which again is why the conversation with the Netherlands is so critical and important for us. Oh, I need to back that up one slide. Okay, so when we talk about the investment of $300 million into the development of the plant protein sector, we're doing that in what we call two veins of investment. One is technology, large-scale science and innovation projects that are funded primarily with for-profit private sector companies. Our investment thesis is that we're taking what we call a value chain approach to the development of the sector. And so we invest in everything from plant breeding technology through to production, agriculture, through to the development of new processing technologies and creation of new ingredients, through to the marketing and sale of those products on a global basis. Again, here where I sit in Western Canada, we export 90% of our agricultural production. If we are successful in the transition from a commodity provider to an ingredient supplier, which we will still be exporting a large portion of those ingredients. They will just be higher value and maybe consumer products. But again, I think it speaks to the importance of a relationship with a nation like the Netherlands in terms of bringing in that food technology and food processing. The other stream of investments we make, we call capacity building. So on the technology side, we're going to be developing new knowledge, new technologies, new products, and new services. We also have to ensure that we have a highly competitive business environment in which to launch those new technologies and extract the return on investment that we want out of that. So we're really working in this area to build capacity in our sector and amongst our members in areas like regulatory modernization, in areas like the development of talent and skills, better utilization of data and information technology, improving intellectual property management, improving our brand in a global basis. So both streams of investment are critical and important. And one is focused on the development of new knowledge and technologies. The other stream really focused on creating a highly competitive business environment. I'll maybe just touch briefly on a few of the investments that we've announced to date, just to give the audience a sense of the scope and scale of the type of investments we're making, and as an illustration of what I called our investment thesis around a value chain. So I think a couple things. I'm not going to dig into each of these projects, but I think I'll hit on Merit and the winning combination in Futura Seeds as an example. I think I'd like you to take away a few things from this slide. One is the scope of the types of investments we're making, $12 to $20 million. We really believe that large-scale science and innovation projects will be transformative for our sector. The other thing I would like you to take away is the approach we're taking to building consortia around the projects. So Merit, for example, is a processing company. They're building a large facility in the prairies that will be processing and extracting high quality protein isolates and concentrates out of canola and pulses. based on technology that was developed here in Canada. So they're building a processing facility. We've put them in a collaborative R&D project with Pitura Seeds on the front end. That's a breeding company. They're looking at pea breeding and the effect of different quality parameters on the processing efficiency at Merit. And then on the back end of that project is the winning combination. They're an ingredient company and they're developing consumer packaged goods for the products that are coming out of the Merit breeding, the Merit production facility. So I think you get a sense of, you know, the value chain approach that we're taking. We know that tweaks and things that we do on the breeding side will affect the efficiency and the functionality of ingredients that come out of processing. That has downstream effects for companies like the winning combination. So again, very much a value chain approach to these large-scale science and innovation projects. Here's a few more in terms of Corteva, a large-scale investment in breeding technology to reduce fiber content and improve protein content and quality in canola. The Provision Analytics-led project is really interesting when you think about this from what might be important to end-use customers in the Netherlands. This is a project where we're really building out a chain of custody traceability system so that we can give our end-use customers confidence in the products that they're buying, and also to ensure that we're tracking things like the environmental footprint of the products that we're producing. So to date, we've made 11 investments, total project value of $153 million, and Protein Industry Canada investment of $79 million. But I would like to say that we're really just getting going. Just a few more slides, and Carolee, I think I'll make it on time here. I just want to touch on the importance of partnership, but I think I opened up with this. And I hope you can see that there's complementary strengths that we're bringing. As a primary producer, significant acreage, tonnage of plant protein, coupled together with what the Netherlands brings in terms of food processing capacity, marketing and distribution know-how for food products, it really lends itself to this idea of a strategic partnership. You know, in terms of technical expertise, we're bringing plant breeding, sustainable growing practices, you know, for the reliable quality supply of plant ingredients, and the Netherlands bringing expertise in processing, product development, efficient food manufacturing technologies, coupled together, I think really lends itself to an exciting partnership on a go-forward basis. So for us, you know, what's on the horizon? We've got the Bridge to Food Summit coming up next week. We hope that a lot of people on the webinar today can join us and learn a lot more about what Canada has to offer to strengthen the opportunities around partnership. And a few events coming up in July and August around matchmaking, fall of 2020, Canada Netherlands Webinar 2, and a virtual mission that was, of course, supposed to be in person, but given the issues and challenges we're facing today, everybody's pivoting to a virtual webinar, which we are doing as well. So again, please join us at the virtual Plant-Based Protein Summit if you have the opportunity. June 22nd, the first day, will be the State of the Pulse industry in the Canadian ecosystem. I'll be speaking there, as will our Chief Technology Officer, but I think more importantly, you'll be hearing directly from successful project proponents from Protein Industries Canada about what it means to work with us and the impact and effect we're having by investing in these large-scale science and innovation projects. So, Carolee, I think I will stop it there, and I think I just squeaked in under my allotted time. Thank you very much.
I'd like to introduce Jeroen Willemsen, who's the Innovation Manager at Protein Shift at Food Valley. The Protein Cluster is an international Food Valley business network assisting companies to profit from plant proteins. Currently, TPC has 54 members representing a mix of innovative startups, SMEs, and corporates. Jeroen, over to you.
Thanks, Carolee, and thanks for sharing with you some plant protein food for thought in preparation of the next week's Bridge to Food Summit. So I'm doing so on behalf of the Protein Cluster. The Protein Cluster being, let's see if this works. Yes, there it is. The protein cluster is a business network of Food Valley. Food Valley being the heart of the Dutch agri and food ecosystem located in Wageningen, and Protein Shift is one of the 4 innovation themes. And within Food Valley and the protein cluster, we do not perform any research. What we do is we try to harvest from all the innovation in the plant protein scene, new technologies, new ingredients, new products, semi-finished products, or even new human capital, which is coming across and which can help us to tackle the protein puzzle that we are all facing. The protein cluster is a business network. As said, this shows you what members are currently a member of the protein cluster, and it's rapidly growing. I think some of the new companies are missing on this slide. But anyway, it's a nice mix of startups, scale-ups, and corporates, all trying to contribute to a more sustainable protein production and consumption system in the Netherlands and abroad. And I've been asked to share with you some examples of what's happening in the Dutch plant protein ecosystem. So let me highlight 5 recent innovations, and following that, let me share with you some opportunities that I see in strengthening the Dutch-Canadian collaboration. So on the left, what you see here is sugar beet leaf, which is produced in substantial amounts by Kosen, which is a large Dutch company, amongst other activities, active in sugar beet production, and leaving quite some sugar beet leaves, which are packed with Rubisco, said to be the most abundant protein in the world. And Kosen has set up a pilot factory which raffinates and which isolates also the Rubisco from the plant beet, the sugar beet leaves. So it's all about valorization and side stream valorization, also adding to one of the solutions with respect to solving the protein puzzle. Next to that is an initiative called Dutch Edamame. 10 growers from the Dutch province of Flevoland joining forces in not only growing fresh soy, so Dutch edamame, but also starting an innovative collaboration in terms of also communication and branding, also this Dutch soy. And as we all know, moving towards shorter chains is a challenge that has many benefits if we are managed to give that also some more body and some good examples. And these growers are just doing that. Next to that, already mentioned before, I think the Dutch plant-based ecosystem is evolving quite rapidly, and it's no longer only a matter of startups and scale-ups harvesting the potential there, but it's also the corporates now really zooming into this fascinating field. And Upfield is just one of the corporates now also moving their R&D also to Wageningen, to the Food Valley region. And well, Upfield is said to be the largest plant, how do they call themselves, plant-based consumer packed goods factory or company in the world, active in 95 countries, and recently also acquired an Israeli company called BioLife in plant-based cheese, active. Next to that, the fourth example, these two talented young entrepreneurs, Corian and Edgar, starting a company called Fumi Ingredients. You cannot read it, but they positioned themselves with their technology and products as cutting out the middle hen, as they say, by using microorganisms, for example, from baker's and brewer's yeast, with their innovative technology to produce highly functional proteins, which can, for example, be used and applied as a replacement of chicken egg white. And last but not least, as said before, it's also about creating value along the chain. With an example, a company called Oja that I founded 12 years ago, really tapping into the need for very juicy, tender plant meat, as I call it. And at that time, I had quite some contact with Ethan Brown, the founder of Beyond Meat. We both doing our thing on different parts of the world, also creating value, and it's good to see that Oja and Beyond Meat are also active in the same small country as the Netherlands as we are. So it's also about creating value. So just 5 examples of what's happening within the Dutch plant protein ecosystem. Well, now moving towards what's more happening in this ecosystem. We see that along the chain, various companies and organizations are now really joining forces, all with their own specific aims and added value in that whole chain. Just a brief overview of some of the initiatives that are going on and happening right now in the Netherlands. And I've highlighted 2 examples from the protein cluster perspective from Food Valley. For example, we launched a few months ago the block protein facility map, which maps all the locations in the Netherlands where companies can do tests or scale-up production trials or industrial production in the whole range of all kinds of plant protein products. We think that at this moment, at least that's how we experience it, capacity is the limiting factor because also the market is rapidly growing, as we all know. And on the other hand, we have our annual summit, which will also be hosted this year on October 13th. Also, again, highlighting some of the recent developments in the plant protein ecosystem. What we furthermore see in the Netherlands is that there is a whole Dutch protein strategy now currently being developed. The EU asked the Netherlands, but also other EU countries, how are you acting upon the desire for Europe to become more plant protein self-sufficient? And the Dutch Ministry of Agriculture has stated 3 focal themes in which they will focus for the next years. So production cultivation on protein-rich crops, the development of innovative protein sources, and the protein production by means of side stream valorization. Well, having said that, this gives you an overview of the number of acres in the Netherlands currently being used for plant protein crops. And it is only a fraction of the 28 million acres that Bill mentioned before, which are present in Canada. So it shows you that I think we have to be honest in that respect, that from this stamp that the Netherlands, this postal stamp that the Netherlands is from a global perspective, that it is very useful and we really need to harvest also the awareness and the motivation also from these growers, some of which are shown here. We cannot close the protein gap ourselves. So that brings me to 2 opportunities that I would like to highlight for the Canada-Netherlands plant protein connection. So how paradoxical it may sound, the EU wishes to become more plant protein self-sufficient, but one of the solutions is, of course, at least that's what we think, is if more plant protein is used directly for human consumption. And of course, then it has to meet industrial and consumer demands. And so we call that the plant protein gap, which is rapidly growing at the moment. We do see a trend that the market consumers are asking more and more for convenient, healthy, and sustainable plant protein products. It's not just the Netherlands, but also abroad. So I do think that Canada can really contribute to helping to bridge that plant protein gap, especially in terms of sourcing and delivering ingredients and semi-finished products, which are very useful for industry to use, also in the Netherlands. And the second opportunity, let's see if it still works. Yeah, oh, one back. Is here. It is fascinating to see that both in Canada and the Netherlands, quite some also technological plant protein innovations are being developed and are also being implemented and scaled up. Just the example of DSM and Birken simultaneously announcing also to scale up their production in terms of isolation of specific proteins from canola, for example. I do think we almost have the moral obligation to join our forces in there, because the global protein challenge is so much. We simply cannot afford not to collaborate in that respect. So really looking forward to also joining forces there. Yeah, this is a quote from myself a few years back, but I still think it's very valid also in the respect of the Canadian-Dutch collaboration here. I hope that together we can really turn the serious business of the protein shift into serious business. And we really need to cooperate on that and to join our forces for now and the future. So that concludes my presentation. Finally, you are of course welcome to join our online summit on October 13th and 14th, but on the 13th of October, protein shift will be presented in more depth. So Carolee, I give it back to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Jeroen. I would just like to ask our participants if they could please use the Q&A functionality to ask questions to the panelists. We've seen a number of really fascinating questions come in through the chat, but it's quite difficult for us to manage the process of weeding out which are questions for the panelists and which might be questions for the audience writ large. So if you do have questions for the panelists, I would like to ask that you please submit those via the Q&A button that's on the bottom of your screen. So I'd like to thank all of our speakers today for the insightful presentations. I see that our audience agrees that today's content has been very interesting, as there are already a number of questions lined up. As our panelists get started on answering these, please do send in more questions via the Q&A chat functionality. So Jeroen touched on this already quite well in his presentation, but I'd like to open up the question to all the presenters to say, if you had to choose one, what would you say is the area in plant protein offering the greatest potential for partnership between Canadian and Dutch companies?
Sorry, is that a question for me, Carolee?
It's for whoever would like to take it. If you'd like to expand on it, Jeroen, that would be very welcome. And then we can open up the floor to other panelists to expand on it as well.
Carolee, if I may, being a trade commissioner in agri-food here in the Netherlands for Canada, what I see is that compared to other North American and American Chinese companies, I think what Canadian companies can still do is use the Netherlands or use the Benelux as a bridgehead to break into the European market with all its wonderful business opportunities in plant proteins. We're seeing a significant growth in Canadian companies using the Netherlands as a bridgehead, but a lot more is possible. So I really would like to encourage companies to contact us or Henk Snoeken's team to figure out, how to set things in motion. But it's compared to the United States and China, it's very clear to me that Canada can really increase its activities that are based in the Netherlands. Thank you.
Carolee, may I expand a little bit on that? I think, thank you, Diederik, for you put the ball just before the goal. I think at the moment we see in Canada more and more, let's say, the urge coming up to look at the diversification of export and strategic partners in an economic sense. Of course, the largest consumer markets at the moment are found in Asia, especially when you look at the Western perspective at the moment. But I think Europe is a part of the world where Canada could find some more cooperation possibilities, certainly when we look at the geopolitical situation at the moment. And I think everybody will understand that a little bit. Second thing is what I always hear from companies, and especially smaller companies here in Canada, is the access to market Dutch companies have, and also the great knowledge of the world market, which is a very important complementary thing, I think, for smaller Canadian companies who want to scale up. See, for example, a lot of tech companies who are having most fantastic ideas, and I think cooperation in the field of marketing and access to market would be a great combination. Third thing, but that's more from a political perspective, is collaboration in the field of food waste and sustainability. I think the agriculture in both our countries, but perhaps in the Netherlands even a little bit more at the moment than in Canada, is agriculture has to do more and more with environmental constraints. Look at the water situation, look at the emissions situation. I think Canada and the Netherlands would also with, let's say, comparable political systems and comparable wishes in the field of economic development combined with environmental sustainability, would be great partners in that field. In the Netherlands, we call it circular agriculture. I think in Canada, it would be called climate neutral or something like that, but there's great prospects also there. For the market situation, you should be more with Jeroen, I suppose, than with me.
Examples of collaboration between Dutch and Canadian companies that might already be in place? And then as a related question, how partnerships between Canadian and Dutch companies may be able to take advantage of PIC programming?
So for
well,
Bill, to you.
Oh, well, I was answering the second part of the question ahead of you, Hank. Maybe I'm preempting, but you know, a lot of opportunity for partnering on PIC projects. And so certainly, you know, the investment that we make from Protein Industries Canada is investment with for-profit private sector companies with a Canadian footprint. You know, part of the objectives that we're trying to achieve and accomplish with our investment is to increase science and innovation investment in Canada. But that doesn't mean that international companies cannot participate in terms of being a member of a consortia, doing some work, bringing technologies. So there's lots of opportunity. If there are companies out there that are interested in PIC projects, please send us a note. We can connect you with Canadian-based companies that are looking at developing projects that might need access to technologies, might need access to talent and skills, might need access to end-use markets. So there's lots of opportunity. We can certainly figure out creative ways to make that happen.
And Carolee, I just on the question on examples of partnerships, you know, a good one to illustrate, I think, is the Botanica one that that Bill mentioned as part of you know, one of the numbers of projects that we funded. It's you know, the company has developed an interesting technology for taking out the oleosomes, which is the oil bodies in oil seed crops. A lot of that science comes from Wageningen. You know, there's an expert there who is, you know, a world-class expert in oleosomes, which is the oil bodies inside of oilseed plants and oil seeds. And you know, that partnership, I think, has been a really good illustration of you know, groundbreaking new technologies where you have a Canadian company and a Dutch-based research institute that's collaborating to put you know, new technology together that's really going to be transformative. So what it will allow, for example, is instead of a conventional canola crush oil that we see, you get an oleosome body which can replace palm oil or coconut oil, which is the fat ingredient used in plant-based meats, and it has a better health profile. It has a low carbon index in terms of its production. So it's a really good illustration of the collaboration that can move really good food processing technology along and create better products as a result of the initiative between the two countries. So that's one good example, I would say.
Perhaps I can add one or two more examples. First of all, also the other way around exists. University of Alberta cooperating since a few months, I think, with the Dutch company Trouw, which is part of the Nutreco conglomerate. Also a combination of companies looking for certain expertise and knowledge in a certain area. And the University of Alberta in Edmonton and Trouw have found each other and are looking for a longer term cooperation. A company I would like to mention also is Biolucent. It's a company that has got is partly funded by PIC support. It is a Dutch Canadian example by its CEO Michael Riedijk, one of these Dutch guys that lives in Canada and is now a Dutch guy with let's say a Canadian pronounced back name, but born and or at least breeded in the Netherlands, so to say. But also when you're asking about what can we do for these kind of collaborations, we are now looking together with Michael to see if a combination with Wageningen University could even further enrich his production processes and his knowledge. So I think there's a lot possible, and there are existing examples.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. So I've got a few questions in now about PIC programming more specifically. So one of the questions is, does PIC invest in research projects alone, academic research projects, or is the presence of SMEs or startups mandatory? Perhaps, Bill, I'll turn that one over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Carolee. So the investments that Protein Industry Canada makes are directly with for-profit private sector companies, and that's our goal in the development of new technologies and the commercialization of those technologies. So we require at least 2 for-profit private sector companies, one of which must be an SME. Now, that doesn't exclude academic institutions, certainly. So much of the work that we're doing is being conducted at post-secondary institutions and government labs in Canada, but the projects in and of themselves are developed with a collaborative R&D of private sector companies.
Okay, great. As a follow-on or related question, there's a question about how a food tech SME providing IT services might get involved in projects, and if there's a specific project targeting digital transition within food processing.
Yeah, so that's a very, very specific question, but we do have a lot of work going on digitization of work across the value chain. So some of the projects that we funded, I mentioned one which was related to led by Provision Analytics, looking at the development of chain of custody work across the value chain. That will extend eventually into processing facilities to make sure that we can track food products from farm to fork. And so opportunity there. We don't have a project on the books right now that has that, but we have a number of projects that we're working with processing organizations here in Western Canada that might be interested in a conversation with companies that have technology in those areas. So certainly would be happy and willing to open the doors and have the conversation.
Okay, great.
If I just add to that, Carolee, I think the way the supercluster program is designed in Canada as a result of the contribution agreement is that there's an intent to open these innovations to companies that want to be part of it if they can negotiate an arrangement with an existing consortium. So, we try to provide some base level of information in terms of where the research focus is, And then if companies feel they have some interest in or an ability to add to that, then they can negotiate with that consortia to see if there's a contribution they can make. So, we're trying to build the strength of multiple innovation systems of companies together to strengthen the whole ecosystem.
Great, thank you.
Perhaps one addition, Carolee. I think one of the very practical cooperation agreements we've made with PIC is that in the context of the Bridge to Food conference next week, we're also looking at, let's say, very practical ways of matchmaking. So if this question is done by a Dutch company looking for Canadian partners in this field, then please let us know. We could, together with you, Carolee, look at a partner for them, as we said before. And yeah, the other way around, when a Dutch company is looking for this kind of expertise in Canada, we would also be able to reach out to this company. So it's also, there's also a very practical possibility next week around the Bridge to Food conference.
Okay, wonderful. There's also a question about co-product. So I was going to broaden this one out a bit and open it up to the panel to perhaps get your perspectives on what kinds of collaboration you think might make sense or might be possible in the co-product space as well, to increase the value stream of the entire plant crop that's used for the protein production. Is this an area?
So we have a couple of projects. Yeah, we have a couple of projects on the go, Carolee, that look at the utilization of co-products. One, actually, Hank mentioned with Lucent Biosciences out of Vancouver, looking at utilization of pea and lentil hulls as a byproduct for a carrier for micronutrient fertilizer. I think one of the biggest challenges that we've got on a go-forward basis for the development of our sector here is starch utilization. So we're looking at a number of projects and working with a number of organizations that are extracting protein out of peas and looking at the utilization of starch. So anyone who is interested in that type of work, we'd certainly be interested in a conversation about a Protein Industries Canada project on a go-forward basis. We know, so we are called Protein Industries Canada, but we've always been around total crop utilization because it's really critical that we get that piece of it right to make the economics of this work. And so certainly a focus of R&D on a go-forward basis for us.
Okay, great, thank you. And just quickly before we close, I'd like to ask Jeroen if he could maybe comment on his perspectives for the global plant protein sector. If we look 15 years out, what does that look like?
Well, I have this glass ball here, and I see that, as said before, we simply cannot afford not to cooperate or to keep up our cooperation between Canada and Europe in general, or in terms of bridging that protein gap. Everything what's happening right now in this new COVID-19 reality, it is all about restoration. That's how I see it. We are currently restoring performing some restoration activities to our whole food system. And we need to redefine how we are not just producing, but especially also consuming our food. And I hope that within the next 15 years, we do not only realize that this restoration is the urgency for restoration. It needs to happen right now, but it's also turning into behavioral changes. And I'm sure that with all the innovations and the collaboration also between Canada and the Netherlands, as I think two front-running countries in the plant protein puzzle, I think we can really help to make consumers worldwide revalue the power of plant proteins. And so I do think that this restoration, which is now being accelerated by everything that's happening to us, I do see that it will turn out also into behavioral changes on the consumer side within 15 years. So really looking forward to seeing that. Actually, we already see the numbers in the Netherlands, but also broader in terms of retail sales. that there is this restoration towards a consumer pattern in which plant proteins are becoming more important, animal proteins somewhat less, so that also the balance there is restoring. So the signs are there. I think the basic fundament is there. So let's go.
Great. Would any of our other panelists like to expand on that or provide their perspectives on what they see in their crystal globes?
Bill, you might want to talk about our 2035 vision in terms of what we see for plant proteins and you know the kind of industry that we're looking to build.
Yeah, thanks, Frank. It's so at Protein Industries Canada, we're thinking about this question in terms of what the market is going to be in 2035, and we look at the trends around the fundamentals around population growth, changes in socioeconomic status, people thinking about the food choices that they're making and the environmental impacts that has, the health impacts of the food that they're making, the growth that we see in the aquaculture market, the companion animal market, and the livestock market and the feed market as well. You know, we're doing some background work right now, but we know that the growth in the plant protein sector is going to be significant in the next 15 years. And we don't assume that those fundamentals that are underpinning that growth are going to change. Population growth is going to continue. Disposable income of a large swath of the globe is going to tend to increase. People will be consuming more protein. We know that we need to shift our diets away from animal agriculture to sustain global food demand. And so we see quite significant growth over the next 15 years. You know, for plant protein, pea protein, for instance, we know that market, our best estimate based on some market research we've done, is probably a $2 to $2.5 billion market, just pea protein alone. That doesn't consider other sources of plant protein or the co-products either. So we think it's a huge market opportunity, and that Canada is certainly well positioned to meet that global demand.
Okay, great. Well, I see that we've reached the time limit, and so I'd like to take this opportunity to thank everyone for taking the time to join us today and to learn more about opportunities for collaboration in plant protein between Canada and the Netherlands. Please do fill out the survey that will pop up on your screen when the webinar closes. We really appreciate your feedback. The survey will offer an opportunity for you to sign up to receive more information about future matchmaking and collaboration activities. A big thank you again to our partners and presenters, OostNL, Protein Shift at Food Valley, the Consulate General of the Netherlands in Vancouver, Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada, and the Embassy of Canada to the Netherlands. Wishing everybody a wonderful rest of their day, and thank you again.